Hello, everyone, and welcome to December's Comfort Book Club discussion of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. As always, I'm joined by my mum, Donna.
Hello, everyone.
We're on the sofa today because of the Christmas tree being up now.
Yeah.
I can't get the chairs that I normally pull out to sit in front of this bookcase, so it's looking a little bit different to our video today, but that's because of all of the lovely festive decorations, so that's nice. Oh, it was so fun to return to this,
To
wasn't
revisit it. It really was.
Yeah, a sort of classic childhood favourite, but I really enjoyed returning to it again, especially at Christmas. Thank you to all of the Comfort Book Club readers who sent in voice messages to add to our discussion of the book. We'll be including those messages and responding to them after our chat together.
Great.
But yes, I mean, I always associate this book with Christmas time.
Yes, absolutely. The horror of it being always winter but never Christmas. The famous line is, I think it really comes through to you as a child.
Oh, it does. I remember that description of Narnia as being the land in which it is always winter but never Christmas. Horrified me as a child. But of course, Christmas does come.
It does indeed.
In the book, which is a lovely touch. Yeah. And it is such a comfort read. I think that adults still very much enjoy.
Absolutely.
As well.
I mean, I first had it read to me in school, actually. I must have been very young. So that was my first meeting. And I know you read it very young too.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just think it's a charming book, and it held up very well.
Yes.
To rereading all these years later. I mean, I've read it once or twice. I think when you were young, of course.
Yes, of course.
And that, but it really is charming, isn't it? And it's got a lovely message for everyone.
Yes, it does. And this time, one of the things I really noticed was the significance of its wartime setting.
Yeah.
It's set during World War II. The story begins with some siblings being sent into the countryside.
Evacuees.
Yes, they're evacuees to escape the bombing of London. And they're without their parents. And it's a brilliant setting because, of course, it's the classic old country house setting.
It's really,
when then mysterious things start to happen.
Yeah.
And I do think that this book probably is part of the reason why I still love stories about old houses in the English countryside.
No, I think I had, when we first went to Castle Howard here in Yorkshire, it was like, I thought to myself, oh, this would be perfect, for The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Yes. And then they did a Christmas
display one year. It was
which
gorgeous.
I've actually filmed that, so I'll pop a link to that in the video description box if any of you would like to check that out, because Castle Howard is an incredible historic home near us, and every year they do something special for Christmas. And one year they decorated many of their rooms as scenes from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and it was really magical.
It was.
Wasn't it?
It really was.
So yes, I'll pop that in the video description box if you want to watch that, because it is lovely to watch that after having read the book.
Absolutely.
But yes, its setting is one that I just love and still love to this day.
Yeah.
And I think also its wartime setting explains too why food is so important in this book. I really noticed the food.
I love the food. I mean, starting with the tea with the fawn with Mr. Tumnus, and what lovely tea, plenty of
buttered toast, and sardines and an iced cake.
Yes, it was lovely.
I think it was like 3 types of toast, like buttered toast, sardines on toast, jam on toast,
possibly, yes, and an iced cake.
So much toast.
Yes, obviously very comforting. And probably dripping with butter, which in wartime would of course not be easy to come upon.
Yes.
And I think that also the appeal to Edmund of actually the Turkish delight, and the sort of way that it's described, the sweetmeat, and the way the wicked witch uses it to entice him and drug him, basically.
Enchanted.
Yeah.
And yes, that's such an interesting aspect of the story. And you were reading an essay, I think, about The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and the wartime significance is, of course, important.
It is.
And it's interesting to think how both C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, and they were both, such friends.
Yes.
But the war and the sort of political atmosphere
Hitler
at that time
yes.
Really affected both their writing.
It did.
And you see that in The Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe too, don't you?
Definitely. I mean, she's a complete dictator, isn't she?
The White Witch. She is.
Absolutely. And anybody who says anything against her is frozen into a statue. Or,
yes, she's just this horrendous dictator.
Yes.
And Hitler loved sweet things.
Absolutely.
And he loved, very sort of sweet tooth.
Yes.
And it's interesting to think of that as well in the context of Edmund being tempted and enchanted by this incredibly sweet Turkish delight.
Yes.
That is in no way nourishing or sustaining.
No,
it's something that you can't live off, and it's such a contrast to the kind of hearty, wholesome food that the beavers provide.
Is another lovely bit.
Yes.
Often Lewis steps out of being the author and comes into it, and one of his things is where he says, I think there's nothing as nice as sort of freshly caught fish, trout,
just fried
and
sort of boiled potatoes or something. Yes. I love the way that C.S. Lewis does directly address the reader
very much
in the book.
It was comforting as a child.
Yes,
I found.
And he addresses a child reader.
Yes,
specifically.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's actually a lovely touch that I noticed more as an adult reading it.
Yeah.
But there is something comforting about that as a child when the author addresses you in that way.
I think so. And there's humour for the adult reading it too. We were talking about how much later in the book, when the four children are kings and queens of Narnia, how much they dislike busybodies and people who weren't
interferers.
Yes.
And they sort of get rid of the busybodies and interferers. They stop them from being busybodies and interferers.
Yes.
And you like the humour of that, especially as an adult. I think.
And of the professor, who of course whose home it is, they're actually evacuated too. Who I think is a relative of their mother's or something.
Yes, that's right.
Uncle maybe, or
some kind of distant relative, cousin maybe, or something. Yes. And I was actually inspired to read again, and this one I really hadn't read since I was a child. I have read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe as an adult, but I had never returned to the others. And I reread The Magician's Nephew.
Yes, because Lewis himself always wanted you to read that first, then the next one.
Yes, I mean, this was actually written after The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, but it was written as a prequel to this book.
Yes.
And it sets up the story of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. You see the creation of Narnia in The Magician's Nephew, and it also explains who the professor is, that he's someone who definitely knows Narnia.
Which is strongly hinted.
It is strongly hinted, and it's confirmed in this book. And also the wardrobe, the magic wardrobe, is explained as well. You get a lot of little details. And the lamppost is also explained in The Magician's Nephew.
And indeed, the witch herself is explained.
Yes. So I really do recommend, if you enjoyed The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and you haven't read The Magician's Nephew, then sort of do pick this one up and read that too. And you might also get tempted to read on through the rest of the series. But this one really does set up The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe so well, and I think it's a nice one to read after, actually, when you do know the world of Narnia. And you can appreciate the details.
I read it after too. I think it's just the way that I read it, but I mean, either way it works, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It works either way.
I really love, by the way, the editions that you're showing. I had this as a child, which is the Puffin.
The Puffin one.
Yes, very classic, and I loved it. But it only has black and white illustrations, and apart from the cover, but I absolutely love the way they've used.
They've
colorized.
They've colorized them in these editions, which are still available. HarperCollins did these, and I love them too. I love reading these editions. You can see just how fabulous they are. That
she was a
they have
wonderful
done them in
illustrator, Pauline
colour.
Baines,
She
wasn't
was,
she?
and she did such a good job.
Yeah,
on
absolutely
these books. They're
gorgeous.
iconic.
They
the
are. They
illustrations,
really are.
aren't they?
Yeah,
Like,
they are.
You do think of them, I think.
Yes, just like with Winnie the Pooh, you think
exactly,
of Ernest
you
Shepherd
do, and The Wind and the Willows too.
Yes,
you know, you think of him, and with the C.S. Lewis books, I do always picture her illustrations.
Yeah,
I also picture the very old TV series.
Yeah, from the 90s.
Yes, I think it was an old BBC TV series.
It was a series, I think.
You'll have to let me know if any of you remember that too. There's obviously been the more recent film, which starred Tilda Swinton very memorably as the White Witch.
Very scary, actually.
She was very scary.
She got it perfectly right.
She did. But what I always really associate the characters with is this old TV series that I saw when I was little, and I thought that was really well done too.
It was beautiful. It was lovely, Lucy, because she's so central. It's really, Lucy is really the reader, I think. She steps forward in it, and it's her.
Yes, and he addresses Lucy. I mean, it's dedicated to a Lucy.
Yes.
At the beginning of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It says, "To Lucy Barfield, my dear Lucy, I wrote this story for you, but when I began it, I had not realised that girls grow quicker than books. As a result, you are already too old for fairy tales, and by the time it is printed and bound, you will be older still. But some day you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again. You can then take it down from some upper shelf, dust it, and tell me what you think of it. I shall probably be too deaf to hear and too old to understand a word you say, but I shall still be your affectionate godfather, C.S. Lewis."
Isn't that lovely?
It is.
I love. He comes over as a man, I think, in this book that really does understand and like children.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you do feel that, just like how Aslan likes children in the book, the White Witch does not like children. No. Not at all. And, that's interesting, because I think there's a real warmth for children that comes across in this book, and that comes from C.S. Lewis himself, right?
I think
from
so
the beginning.
Too. I think so. I love the way he mentions it as a fairy tale.
Yes.
And you do see elements definitely of the Snow Queen, I think.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that because I was thinking of how The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe has this incredible legacy of books and fantasy worlds that it's gone on to inspire. I think of Philip Pullman, for instance. His world's very much inspired by both Lewis and Tolkien. And someone like Catherine Rundell.
The Impossible Creatures.
The Impossible Creatures. She's just started this new fantasy series I think is heavily inspired by C.S. Lewis and his works. So these books have left an incredible legacy.
They have.
But I also think it's interesting to think about what stories he pulled on.
Absolutely.
That inspired
primarily the Bible, obviously.
Yes. I mean, I didn't get the allegory really as a child when I read it.
Very young.
I mean, you talked about it to me.
Yes,
I do remember that. But still, I mean, I just thought of Aslan as a lion, and that was it. And I just loved
you
the
don't
story.
have to do more than that because it's a lovely story. Obviously, as a child,
exactly. As an adult, you obviously see things differently. Yes. But as a child, I was just bewitched by the story itself, and loved it. Loved the idea of the lion.
Yes.
All of that. But so yes, of course, that's an influence. Like you said. The Snow Queen, the fairy tale, is such an influence on his character of the White Witch,
and indeed of Edmund.
And on Edmund.
Edmund is like Kay, isn't it?
The boy who gets a splinter of ice in his heart. Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting because the four children feel very believable to me.
They do. Edmund's such an interesting character.
He becomes a very good character. He's completely reformed.
He does, and. You feel sorry, I think, for all of the children because you know that they've been sent away from their parents at this very difficult time in history. They're all feeling a bit lost and alone, and you get some significant hints in the book that Edmund is having a very hard time at his school, or he was. And he's obviously turned into a bit of a bully.
Yes.
But it's Lucy who says or thinks at one point that finally Edmund seemed like his old self again by the end of the book, how he was before he went to that horrible school and everything started going wrong for him. So you feel like he was bullied at school probably first, and that it was just not a good school for him. And the joy that his siblings feel and kind of getting the real Edmund back.
That's
I found
lovely.
That really poignant.
Yes, it is. And he becomes very wise and very just.
Yes, he does.
And that's quite clear through the series. He's also very understanding. I think as you go through the series, you see that.
And I think with him, you really do get that big character growth.
Yes, and it's shown very clearly after his walk with Aslan.
Yes.
Aslan's. He begins to become this different person, and he's given the ability to become this very brave. It's his cleverness that realizes they have to chop the wand.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And he really is able to become the hero of the hour, ultimately, at the end of the book. So that's such a satisfying character arc, I think, for children as well, and such an important one to show that even if you make mistakes... you have a chance of redeeming them.
Absolutely.
And that's a lovely message, I think.
Yes, I think it's such a warm message that comes from the book. It is,
And, you know, it's never too late for forgiveness and for change. And I think that's such an important message. But also, so thinking about the literature that influenced The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, you spoke about the Snow Queen and how much. And I also thought of the Secret Garden.
Oh, the Robin.
Yes.
When you said that to me, I thought, oh, of course. You know, why didn't I because I would have known, maybe not the Secret Garden until after I was trying to think which order I'd actually read them in. But
I know, I can't remember either.
But of course, you see it very clearly as an adult.
You do. Yes. When the children, for the first time, all four together go into Narnia, they are led by a friendly Robin who takes them to the safety of the beavers when they're in need of protection. And Edmund, who is under the spell of the White Witch at this point, you know, says to his older brother Peter, how do you know that we can trust the Robin? It might be leading us to a trap. And Peter says, oh, well, but, you know, robins, like, they're always such nice birds. They're always good birds in the stories.
Yes, it's so true.
And that is so true. And, of course, the Secret Garden is such a famous example.
I definitely think he was influenced by that.
Yes.
And also I thought Nesbit, there were elements, you know, the talking animals, the things like that, the humour of Nesbit.
It's funny because in The Magician's Nephew, it opens with... it says, in those days, Mr. Sherlock Holmes was still living in Baker Street and the Bastables were looking for treasure in the Lewisham Road. Well, the Bastables are the children from her Treasure Seekers series. So he was assuming, essentially, the children of this time who would be reading his books would have read E. Nesbit, for instance.
And Sherlock Holmes, which, and that's
the Secret
lovely.
Garden too.
I think so, definitely. Yes.
Even the way that they move from winter into spring in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and it's so beautifully described.
That is an amazing description of the awakening of the countryside at spring. It's beautiful, actually.
It is, and that reminds me of the Secret Garden too.
Yeah,
you know,
I can
Narnia
see that.
In itself is a whole garden.
It is.
That's brought to life.
It is. It's a lovely
book.
place. I mean, you realise that as you're reading it. You know, it's beautiful. And, I do love that. They're walking, aren't they? And as they walk, all the snow melts, and they know that, you know, winter is
and
going.
They move from sort of seeing snowdrops to having, you know, apple blossom out. Like it sort of moves
and they see everything in
to
between.
Late spring and everything in between so quickly. As they walk, and that's such an enchanting scene in the book.
It is.
But I also loved the scene with Father Christmas. I mean, when I was little, that was
your favourite. I know.
Yes.
That and Aslan coming alive again.
Yes,
loved
of
that.
course. Yes. But I loved the way that he gives them all such perfect gifts.
Yes.
Mrs. Beaver gets a new new sewing machine.
Yes, I loved that. When she drops off very heavily.
Yes.
And she says, oh, but it's all locked up. And he says, don't worry.
Yes.
Doors, won't stop me.
Yes.
And I think locked doors won't stop me. I think it was lovely.
Yes,
I loved
it
that.
was. I loved the magic and the fairy tale that comes into the book that I think, makes it so special for children.
He fosters it for children. He doesn't destroy any of their belief in goodness or in Father Christmas or any of the mythology that they've grown up with through fairy tales and things like that. It's really beautiful.
Yes, it is. But let's hear now from some of our Comfort Book Club readers who sent in voice messages to add to our discussion. So I'll get them up. So we've got a message from Miriam. Let's listen to Miriam's message.
Hello, Miranda, Donna, and the Comfort Book Club readers. Miriam from California here. This is my first time reading this book, as I only saw the movie with my daughter several years ago. It's a great Christmassy and wintry book that I found was hard to put down. There were some great messages in this book, obviously, primarily the concept of good versus evil, as well as self-sacrifice and giving of oneself. I like the end where Edmund, who started off as a selfish little brat, came through and kind of saved the day. My favorite characters were Tumnus and Aslan, the two most unselfish, I think, in Narnia. And the professor was interesting. We wonder how much he actually knew, or was he just accommodating the kids? Anyway, thank you again for this recommendation.
Oh, thank you, Miriam.
Thank you, Miriam. Yes.
So glad you enjoyed it and that was your first time read of the book too. That's wonderful.
I think it is a page turner. I think Miriam's absolutely right. I noticed that again. It goes very quickly and you think, gosh.
I just read it in one evening.
Yes, me too.
It's just, it is. There's a lot of action actually that happens, you realise. And yes, as I've said, in The Magician's Nephew,
yes, you get the
professor's backstory, and so you know that he very much knows all about Narnia. Okay. So I loved his little cameo in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
I loved how he always kept saying, "I don't know what they teach them in those schools."
yes. But thank you so much for your message, Miriam. And let's listen to our next message, which is from Madeline. Listen to Madeline's message now.
Hi Miranda, hi Donna and all the members of the Comfort Book Club. I am Madeleine, a French reader from Normandy. I watched a few years ago Narnia, the movie, with my children, but I've never read the original book before. It was such a delight to meet again Lucy, Peter and obviously Aslan, but by reading the story, I've discovered a new perspective. At several times, the author speaks directly to the public, especially to the young ones. Sometimes it's just to add funny details, and sometimes you are invited to boost your imagination. You can also find solace. This sensitive approach makes sense, especially among young people who suffered during the war. A very nice way to form specific bonds with the reader and literally turn a book into a friend. Merry Christmas!
Oh, thank you, Madeline.
Thank you, Madeline.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to
you too. And so glad you enjoyed that. And yes, we also really liked the way that C.S. Lewis directly addressed the reader a few times.
It's a lovely point that his readers, because it was published in 1950, might well have been children who were traumatized by the war. And it's lovely to think of them finding that book as a friend, which I think many did.
Yes.
Many did.
I know, and I think that is a lovely point that you made, that it makes it feel more like a friend in a way.
Yes.
That story, because he does directly address the reader, and that's very special. So thank you so much for your message, and let's hear the next message now, which is from Laura.
Hello Miranda, hello Donna, this is Laura from Italy. I must confess I had never read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and I found it incredibly charming and magical. I agree with the author when he writes in the dedication to his goddaughter, One day you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again. I actually felt the pure joy of a child discovering a new fantastic world. I really love the sense of warmth, comfort, and friendship you feel in spite of the cold, snowy landscape and the cruelty of the witch. I adore the hospitality of the little creatures of Narnia, the simple, delicious food they prepare for Lucy and the siblings, and then the return of Father Christmas. Moreover, I believe that if I had read it as a child, I wouldn't have fully understood and appreciated the great moral teaching in the story, the meaning of Aslan's sacrifice. Reading it now, I was both enchanted by the fairy tale and deeply moved by its moral message. I think I will make it a holiday tradition to read this book every December. Thank you, Miranda, for introducing me to this fabulous story.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Laura. What a lovely idea. And that's so nice. I mean, we've had all three so far. It's their first time reading the book, which is lovely.
Yes, and how special if it becomes part of your December and Christmas tradition, Laura. That would be really lovely. But yes, it is such a favourite of ours. So it's lovely to be able to share it with first-time readers as well of the book. Let's listen to our next message now, which is from Anita.
Hi, Miranda, Donna, and Comfort Book Club members. This is Anita from the US. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a book that I always enjoy rereading. What a unique, quaint, and immersive world. This book is packed with a lot of my favorite quotes, characters, and parallels. In fact, I love it so much that one part of my garden is a Narnia garden featuring only blue foliage. Each room in my house is decorated based on a different book, and overlooking my Narnia garden is my spare room, designed based on The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In fact, while I was putting this room together, I happened upon your channel when you featured a visit to Castle Howard back in 2021 when they had a Narnia Christmas. Happy coincidence indeed. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Anita.
Thank you, Anita.
And that's amazing that you first discovered my channel through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes, and Merry
with
Christmas
that.
to you too, Anita.
Yes.
I mean, you obviously really have got yourself organised.
Yes.
Yes.
And yes, your garden themed, your Narnia themed garden, I should say, sounds amazing.
It does, doesn't it?
How lovely. I'm sure
And the room
that's
as well.
beautiful.
I'm really interested to see what your wardrobe would look like.
Yes,
yes,
That to be an extra special one for sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But thank you to all of our Comfort Book Club readers who sent in a voice message, and thank you to everyone who read along with us this month. I hope you're all having a wonderful December, and Merry Christmas to all who celebrate it.
Yeah.
We'll be seeing you again in the new year at some point. I'm definitely having a working Christmas, so I'm going to need a bit of an actual break in January. So I'm not sure when I'll be back on YouTube yet in January, but I look forward to seeing you in the new year. So happy holidays, everyone, and thank you for all your support this year, and see you next year.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye-bye.